is the Will Cain Podcast on ESPN Radio.
There's an earthquake coming for college basketball. There's an earthquake coming that could shake the very foundations of that sport. And for that matter, it could change the foundations of amateur sports altogether. But there's an earthquake coming. And the first tremors of it were felt today. It's the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. I remember when I was a freshman in college. I was a freshman at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. I'm a small-town kid from Sherman, Texas. I mean, our idea of natural disasters growing up in Texas was basically tornadoes and thunderstorms. Never experienced anything like a hurricane, and certainly had never experienced anything like an earthquake. But I'll never forget my freshman year. I was in a dorm room, and it was a dorm with two other guys. It was a three-person room, a lot of us. We were on bunk beds. It's the only way you could fit three guys into a small dorm room like that. And I was on the top bunk, and I'll never forget sleeping in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden my bed starts swaying. It starts going back and forth, almost like all of a sudden your bunk bed turns into a surfboard. It's riding a wave, but obviously there's no water. It's the ground that is simply moving beneath you, and it's rolling and shaking, and it defies all sense of anything. I mean, your reality all of a sudden is untethered. I'd never experienced anything like that. I didn't know what was going on, and what was going on was the first tremors of the Northridge earthquake back in 1993. That earthquake at the time was one of the biggest earthquakes to be recorded in Los Angeles in the United States of America, and it destroyed highways, freeways, buildings across the city of Los Angeles. And there, whatever I was, 30 miles away in Malibu, I was experiencing the first tremors. Now, when again, from a kid from a small town in Texas, it felt like sheer insanity. But for the other guys that were from California, they felt like, hey man, it's an earthquake. Hey, it's a tremor. It was something that didn't feel like a big deal. It felt underwhelming. And yet everyone knew there's something bigger coming. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. That is what this report today from Yahoo Sports, Pete Thamel and Pat Forty feels like. It feels like the tremors before an earthquake. It's simultaneously something that you can blow off, that feels a little bit underwhelming. And yet at the same time, you know it's a big deal. Now, why is it a big deal? Because the schools named, first of all, in this report are big-time schools. They're the biggest of schools in college basketball. The schools named are Duke, Kansas, University of Kentucky, Michigan State, Washington, USC, Texas. There's 20-some-odd schools named. But at the same time, you have these massive names, the foundation of college basketball. There's a little bit of me that's like, that's all? That's what it is? It feels like it should be bigger. It feels like everybody's cheating. I think underneath it all, I assume everybody is cheating. So it's not, I've got the blue ribbon college basketball universities of America listed in an FBI document about cheating, about accepting players who had taken money from agents. And at the same time, while I recognize how big that is, I'm like, yeah, I knew that was happening. It feels like there's more to come, like an earthquake is coming. Yesterday, I was talking to Dan Dockich on this program, and he said to me, Will, it's not that big. There's not that many programs cheating. In fact, he put a number on it. Listen.
I sit here and I go, I hope we all get caught. I hope every one of you get caught. I hope every stinking guy that cheats gets named in the FBI thing. And you know who else does? All these coaches, the 80-90% that don't cheat, are so rooting for this, Will, because we all think this is going to blow college basketball up. It's not going to blow college basketball up. It's not going to blow college basketball up no matter what happens.
Well,
some guys will
if
be
your
fired.
percentages are right, Dan, if it's 80 to 90% are clean, you're right. If 80 to 90% are clean, I hope your percentages are right.
I think my percentages are right. I can't sit there like everybody tells me. Well, we know who the cheaters are, so I say, okay, who are they? And then I say, okay, how do they do it? And nobody has an answer.
If Dan is right, if 80 to 90% of the programs are clean, and that was Dan Dockich on the Will Cain Show yesterday, if 80 to 90% of the programs are clean, maybe there isn't an earthquake coming. And as I sit back and I think about it, could Dan be right? I mean, when I hear the biggest programs in America are accepting players who have already taken money from agents, and we're not going to pretend like coaches and universities don't know what's going on. We can't pretend that after we know that FBI investigations have showed other examples of, for example, high-level Adidas executives funneling numbers like $100,000 to top recruits like Brian Bowen to attend the University of Louisville. So we can't assume anybody's eyes are closed here. Anybody's blind to what's going on. But is it true? Could it just be 10 to 20% of the programs? I mean, there's 300 some odd Division I college basketball programs in the country. If Dan's numbers are right, 10 to 20% would be 30 to 60 programs out there cheating. And if you think about it, the cheating would really center around the biggest names in college basketball, the most desirable students, the most desirable athletes. So is the 110th ranked college basketball program really paying or facilitating money to players to bring them in? And does it even matter? Because if it is 10 to 20%, that's really the only 10 to 20% we care about. The schools that I'm talking about are really the only ones that we care about. Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, North Carolina. That's what we care about. So if they're dirty, isn't college basketball dirty? Doesn't that mean an earthquake is coming? Let's move beyond the names. Let's move beyond the college basketball names. Let's talk about the players. Same thing. It feels big. Listen to this. By the way, if you check out this Yahoo Sports story, you will find it's amazing. There are pictures in the article from spreadsheets from these agents' offices, Agent Andre Miller and his assistant Christian Dawkins. They have spreadsheets of, in quotation marks, loans to players. It's Andy Miller is the agent who's now been decertified and he can no longer represent players. But he did. He represented guys like Kyle Lowry. And Kyle Lowry's name is one of the names you'll find on these spreadsheets. And it's just absolutely fascinating for you to go take a look at. You will find these line items. Loan to Brendan Haywood. Loan to Carlos Delfino. Loan to Markelle Fultz, number 1 pick in the draft last year. Kyle Lowry. Nerlens Noel, top draft pick just a few years ago. Dennis Smith Jr., 9th pick in the draft this past year by the Dallas Mavericks. Big names. But on the other hand, there's guys bigger than this. Are you telling me if these guys were somehow getting money and treating agents like their personal ATM machine, that bigger names were not? Wendell Carter Jr. at Duke. Colin Sexton at Alabama. Miles Bridges at Michigan State. Those are big names. But you know what else? There are bigger names out there. So again, it's like it feels huge, but incomplete. It feels like a tremor where there should be an earthquake. And by the way, if you want the ultimate example of a tremor when you're expecting an earthquake, how about the dollar figures on these line items? Carlos Delfino got $71.39. $71.39. Two remarkable things about that. Number one, it's so low. And number two, the agency kept up with it down to the penny. 39 cents. The numbers get bigger. Kyle Kuzma's on here. Los Angeles Laker, former Utah player. Kyle Kuzma. $6,500. Kyle Lowry, $5,927.51. Again, down to the penny. You want to get the big numbers? Dennis Smith Jr., $43,500. Across the ledger, it looks like another $30,000 might have gone to Dennis Smith Jr., taking his figure up to $73,000. Bam Adebayo at Kentucky, $12,000. Number one, these agents were very interested in exactly how much money they'd allowed these student athletes to get from them, and they were also interested in getting them back because most of these guys didn't sign with, ASM? The agency's name is ASM. So they had to figure out how to get this money back. Some of them are written off as bad loans. Others say, we can recoup this after the draft, after free agency. It's absolutely stunning, but at the same time, it's a little bit like, yeah, we knew this was going on. It's simultaneously a tremor that you're expecting an earthquake from. It's simultaneously underwhelming and big, and I think this is why. In the end, I think this is why. Because you know it, and I know it. We know this is going on. And here's what else we know. We know this down deep. You're never, ever, ever going to stop it. That's Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Here's a question for you. Can this be fixed? Is it even possible to keep big-time money out of big-time athletics? 888-729-3776. It's the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. What's up, everyone? Will Cain here. Support for the Will Cain podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/will. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS, consumeraccess.org, number 3030.
This is an extensive abuse of the current NCAA rule. The bigger question becomes, well, what is the NCAA doing?
The names are names of current and former players, of either them being given money or parents having things paid for or given advances. It's unbelievable.
It is going to really change college sports landscape.
You know, it truthfully does have the potential to change the landscape of college sports, as you just heard from that bump in from Trey Wingo this morning on Golic and Wingo. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea that the earthquake is coming. See, here's the deal. You can make something illegal. You can make something against the rules, but you can't stop people from wanting it. You can't take away incentive. You can make cigarettes taxed to $15 a pack in New York City. And what will you get? You'll get an underground economy of cheap black market cigarettes. You can make drugs illegal, and people will still find their way to heroin. I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. All I'm telling you is where there's incentive and demand, you will find a market. And the NCAA can make it against the rules. It can be completely forbidden for players to accept money. But if there's enough eyeballs and there's enough attention and there's enough money on the sport of college basketball, or for that matter, the sport of college football, then there will be incentive to pay the best athletes in America to come participate. Too many people prosper to think you can ever keep that clean. Listen to Jay Billis a little bit earlier. He was on, I believe, the Stephen A. Smith show talking about just this.
In order for this not to be a crime, these allegations not to be criminal, there doesn't have to be any change in federal law. The only thing that would have to change would be NCAA rules. These are considered crimes because they're violative of NCAA rules, and somehow, under the theory of the government, the schools are the victims here, which I find hard to fathom. But you have to ask yourself, like in hockey, it's okay for an amateur athlete to have an agent, but it's not okay in basketball, it's not okay in football. And if people think that this is not going on in football, they're painfully naive, or they're fooling themselves.
Anytime you have a big-time entertainment product and a labor force that is having its market wages depressed, either for free or cheap, and in college sports it's not free, but it's capped at cheap. It's capped at the price of a scholarship. And I'm not here. This debate, this conversation always turns into, well, these guys are getting scholarships. Or the other side of the equation is, no, it's, forced labor. And it becomes this debate about the guy that loves college sports and the guy that thinks it's corrupt. Let me tell you something. I don't even want to get in that debate right now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what is. That's it. What is. And I'm telling you, the incentive and demand is too great to ever keep college sports clean. How's that war on drugs working out for you? How's it going right now? Cleaned it up yet? The point is, if the demand is great enough, there will be a market, and there's a demand for great college sports. We love it. We love our Saturday college footballs. We love our March basketball. And anytime that's the case, you'll find incentive to get money to entice the best players. I don't think you can ever fix this. I don't know how you end up with a system that doesn't look like pretty much what you got today exposed by the FBI. While we're on it really quickly, I hear Jay Billis, the reason the FBI is in this because it's a violation of NCAA rules. The schools are the victims, yada, yada, yada. And Jay doesn't agree with that. I don't want to venture at all into politics. I'm just a little surprised that this is the top of the FBI's priority list. I'm just a little surprised that when the FBI looks at the current landscape of things over the past, week, that somehow this is one worthy of manpower and investigation. All right, Tyler, you're on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio.
Hey, Will, thanks for taking my call. I think the interesting conversation here is not so much is this going to be the tipping point, but I'm just curious, how hard can the NCAA afford to come down on these programs? I mean, you're talking about you're not talking about Southwest Florida Central Tech. You're talking about your cash cows. Can you really afford to irk these people so much? What's stopping them if you come down too hard from just saying, fine, we're going to remove ourselves from the NCAA, start our own sovereign sort of league? We'll take all that money with us because they're paying to see us, not the NCAA logo. I mean, do I think that's going to happen? No. I think it would take more of something along those lines with football because there's even more money there. But I think it's an interesting thought.
Well, I appreciate it, Tyler. That is an interesting thought. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know what the logistics of that would look like. All I know is this. A fiction can't continue. You can't continue to live in fiction. And the idea that you can keep college athletics free from big-time money is a fiction. You can't live in that fiction. Do you know how valuable it is to these colleges when their sports programs become big time? I mean, UConn in the 1980s was a regional nothing of a school. And no offense to my coworkers who are all big UConn fans, but until UConn basketball got big, it was not a national brand. And I'll hit myself closer to home. In the 2000s, when TCU became a huge football powerhouse, became a national title contender in the late 2000s here, TCU applications, I know this for a fact, exploded. Kids from California, applications from the state of California exploded to go to Texas Christian University, a small 7,000 kid school in Fort Worth. Why? Because the Horned Frogs had cool uniforms and competed for a national championship. And when applications go up, you know what else goes up? Application fees. When applications and application fees go up, revenue goes up. You know what else tends to go up? Student body goes up, meaning more tuition fees. More money. Why? Why more money? Because Andy Dalton was good at quarterback for TCU. You just have to recognize it's not about what you like and don't like. I love college sports. I think amateurism is awesome. I also think it's a fiction at this point. I don't know how you fix this. Ricky in L.A., you're on the Will Cain Show.
Man, how you doing, man? First, I wanted to say the players in college need to be compensated. So money, them getting handed money going to always be involved until they compensated. And I don't mean a stipend. I mean, like, a popular player, he should at least be able to walk home with to get his jersey sales. If you just pay him what he sell alone of his jersey, they can be able to promote their own jersey or something. College, they just crooks. They taking all these kids' money. They want kids to stay for multiple years to make money. It don't even have nothing to do with
Ricky, I appreciate the call. Yeah, Ricky, I appreciate the call. Here's the thing. I will agree with you this. That's at least honesty. Is it an answer? It's at least honesty. It at least recognizes the landscape as it exists. These kids are getting paid. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There'll be a cost if you go down that path. Your non-revenue sports, your swimming and diving, your gymnastics, your Title IX sports, a lot of your women's sports, those are all supported by your big revenue sports. They're all subsidized by football and to some extent basketball. There'll be a cost. You'll be honest about what's going on in the big-time sports, and there will be a cost in some of the smaller sports. The Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who switch to Progressive can save an average of $620. We've got a bit of breaking news in the NFL. There's been a trade. One of the best players in the NFL has been traded to one of the best teams in the NFL. Let's talk to Damien Woody about that on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Now ADT can help protect your family at home and on the go. Get started with ADT's best offer. An ADT starter kit and security camera installed free. A $449 savings, plus you'll get ADT Go, the new family mobile safety app and service with 24/7 emergency response. Go to ADT.com/podcast today to take advantage of ADT's best offer.
With 36-month monitoring contract, Easy Pay and QSP. Early termination and activation fees apply. Additional charge for ADT Go premium services after March 31st, 2018. Certain markets excluded. Licenses available at ADT.com. Offer ends April 1st.
Hopefully you were just listening to that report from Doug Brown, that SportsCenter update. Boy, that quarterback room in Arizona, it's looking lonely. My prediction, that Arizona could be a nice little landing spot for Kirk Cousins come true, that there's places out there that make a lot less sense than the Arizona Cardinals for Kirk Cousins, and we'll just see how aggressive Steve Wilkes and those Arizona Cardinals are in filling up that quarterback room. Also in that report from Doug Brown, something fascinating. Marcus Peters, the 18th pick in the 2015 NFL draft, and an all-pro in 2016, has been traded from the Kansas City Chiefs to the Los Angeles Rams. We're waiting to hear what that compensation will be. It's reportedly draft picks. We'll see how big and how many those draft picks are. Let's bring in our friend Damien Woody. He's in the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. Shell Pennzoil Synthetics, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Damien, what do you think about this trade of Marcus Peters from Kansas City to L.A.?
Well, obviously it's a blockbuster trade, and Marcus Peters is a tremendous talent. But with that talent, he brings some baggage. There's no question about it. It goes back to his time at University of Washington, and we've seen incidences throughout his career. But boy, is he a really good football player. Top 5 cornerback. I think he's going to fit in great with Wade Phillips' scheme with the Los Angeles Rams, because he likes to play a lot of man-to-man and he likes to blitz a lot. So it's almost like they're trying to recreate that Denver Broncos defense when Wade Phillips was with the Broncos. So on the field, it's a good fit. And for the Chiefs, Chiefs are going younger. They're getting younger. They trade away Alex Smith, and Patrick Mahomes is going to be the starter, and that locker room is young. So a lot of times you're looking for that right chemistry in the locker room. So I think it was a good move for both organizations.
Yeah, I saw that the Chiefs' cap situation is not good, and Derek Johnson could soon be gone, longtime linebacker. Tom Bahali could be gone. But back to Marcus Peters for a minute. I saw that Larry Johnson, former running back for the Chiefs, said something about, let this be a lesson to young players. You have an attitude problem, and you're replaceable. You think this is about Marcus Peters' attitude?
Well, I think that's part of it. Another part of it is the Chiefs just didn't want to pay him. It's really that simple. Listen, everyone around the league knows that Marcus Peters is a tremendous talent. Come in, he was a defensive player of the year, a rookie. Defensive player of the year as a rookie. He's been an All-Pro, so no one can deny the talent that he has. He has 18 interceptions in the last 3 seasons, but it's the stuff that happens off the field, even antics on the field. For instance, in the Jets game this past season, where he threw the flag and in the stands, and he thought he got ejected, and it was just a whole fiasco. So, again, when you're a very talented player, you're going to get opportunities. But for the Kansas City Chiefs, they look at it as an opportunity to move on and get some compensation for a player that they knew they weren't going to re-sign.
We were hanging out with you a few months ago. It was me and Ryan Russillo. It was on the air. And this was when this college basketball stuff started to come out, when the news first started to break. And I remember talking to you and you said, yeah, boosters, various people, they tried to give you money. And, of course, Damien Woody, you're pure as the driven snow. You wouldn't take anything like that. You didn't take anything like that. And we laugh because it's true, right? We laugh because it's true, right?
Yes, right. Yes, Will. That's right.
Now, I had Dan Dockich on yesterday, and he said this to me. He said, look, Will, 80 to 90% of college basketball is clean. And I started thinking about the numbers. That really means 30 to 60 programs are dirty, which really means it's just about having the biggest players, the best players that you gotta pay to come to your program. Tell me about that in relation to football. Like, who gets money? The biggest players at every program? Just at the biggest programs? How would that work?
Well, I don't think listen, when you're talking about, some of these top-notch programs, think about this, Will. When you talk about, say for instance, Bama, I'm not saying Bama is going out here and just giving money away tooth and nail or whatever. But what I will say is, boy, when you're cleaning up shop on 5-star blue chip players year in and year out, there's got to be something going on behind the scenes. It's just, you look at University of Georgia, they had a great year this past year. Boy, they cleaned up in recruiting, and you got to give a lot of credit to Kirby Smart. But man, some of these programs, you have to believe there's something going on behind the scenes, because there's no way that you can just keep getting all of these top-notch players every year.
And how would that work in football, Damien? I know it's been a little bit since you were in the college football level. Is it still from the boosters? Is it from agents? How would you go about, paying a player or incentivizing a player to come to your school?
Oh, I mean, the number one thing is the boosters. I mean, boosters have, man, they're, whether it's jobs or, just a lot of, just straight, in the words of Randy Moss, straight cash. There's a lot of different ways where boosters can kind of give you those extra benefits that you're looking for. But like I said, in these big time programs, man, these boosters have a ton of money, and football generates a lot of money. So you got to be able to get the top talent. And I'm pretty sure behind the scenes, there's guys looking behind the scenes to try to lure the top talent to the program.
What's the biggest gift you turned down?
I think it was 15 grand.
How was that?
15 grand, I believe.
How was that presented, man? How was that offered?
Straight cash. Straight cash, man. Off campus, met with a couple people, straight cash. But I had my parents with me. I wasn't going to do that anyway. So my parents kept me on the straight and narrow.
Straight cash, homie.
Straight cash, homie.
Why were you spinning crazy stuff on First Take this morning? What are you trying to tell me? You think Jerry Jones is crazy enough, that he's just wild enough that he would go out for Kirk Cousins? He'd move on from Dak and throw money.
I think you interpreted the. I would say this, and I think you know this as well. Stephen Jones and some other people in the front office have done a tremendous job of kind of reining in Jerry a little bit. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that?
Yes, but I don't even think Jerry unreined. I don't think Jerry unreined is crazy enough to go in on Kirk Cousins. I don't think that.
No, I'm not. No, I never said that Jerry Jones would go after Kirk Cousins. I think it's preposterous. But my whole point is, number one, they don't have the cap space. Okay. Number two, you got other positions you got to fill. You got a quarterback who a couple years ago went 13-3 and was the talk of the league. So why in the world would you pay Kirk Cousins when you got an ascending player? Even though he had a drop off last year, you still would have to think that this guy's an ascending player at the quarterback position on the cheap. It makes no sense.
Of course. It makes no sense. That's why I was wondering. You said it didn't make sense, but then you seemed to jump to Stephen A's side. You're like, but the Cowboys do it.
No, but see what you let Stephen A get you all shaking up, and now you got people thinking that it was me out here saying that, oh yeah, Jerry Jones will go out there and do it. I never said
that. So you're saying 2 weeks in a row I put words in your mouth? 2 weeks in a row I've spun your arguments?
We got to talk about that. When we get back in studio, we really got to talk about that.
All right, Damien Woody. I'll see you in studio next time instead of on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. All right, man?
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thanks, buddy. The Will Cain Show is reminding you can listen to all 3 hours of the show on your phone on the ESPN app. All right, listen, we haven't talked about the Olympics at all, okay? Other programs have, but we have not. But that doesn't mean I haven't been watching, and that doesn't mean that something hasn't really ticked me off. There was a scam perpetrated at the Olympics, and we're all going to sit here and act like it was a heartwarming story. It was a scam. That's straight ahead on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
This is Will Cain.
You can't walk through life that if something you say or something you champion offends one person, then you must stop, because you will not be able to do anything. Somebody thought they caught me in a hypocrisy yesterday, by the way. Boys back in the studio. They thought my whole, hey, Nick Foles should be offended by what Doug Peterson said. Doug Peterson said, yeah, Carson plays in the Super Bowl. We still win. Carson probably wins the MVP. I find that incredibly insulting to Nick Foles. And somebody on Twitter pointed out, look at you all of a sudden, Mr. Snowflake. Look at you worried about everybody being offended. 1 minute you're on your soapbox saying nobody should be offended, and you're ready to secede and start New Texas, where the first rule is no one can be offended. Next moment, here you are saying Nick Foles should be insulted. Am I hypocritical there? I don't think so, Cerruti. It's not quite the same thing, like a personal insult versus widely generically offended, right?
No, I think you're clearly biased, and anytime you talk Eagles, most times you talk Eagles, you are biased towards your Dallas stuff, especially when you talk about Carson Wentz, because you just can't get in your mind that he's better than Dak Prescott. But I disagree with that tweet. I don't think that you were bad there. You're okay.
Okay. I love Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz is great.
Who do you love more,
I think he Well, I love Dak more. I'm going to be honest. I'm not out here lying to folks like the other news channels. I'm not out here, telling you things and pretending like it's objective. I'm telling you I have biases. But hear me out. That's how objective I am. I can overcome my biases. Like when I tell you that I love Carson Wentz, you understand that I got there through a blue and silver prism. Like I looked through my blue and silver glasses and still saw a pretty image of Carson Wentz. That's how much I like Carson Wentz.
It's still hard for you to do that. It's hard for you to compliment him. It's hard for you to say that he should be better than Dak, and that's why they constantly poke you about it on First Take.
Fine. You're just complimenting me. You're talking about the hurdles I overcome to achieve objectivity. They should write journalism books on what I do on a daily basis here.
Please.
They should give lessons.
Now you want praise for this.
I should teach classes.
Now you want praise.
I should teach classes.
You have to overcome the fact that a fact is true, that Carson Wentz is better than Dak, so you deserve a medal for that.
They should line up the 3-letter newsworks and say, watch the Will Cain show from 3 to 6, and you'll see how you overcome bias. First you acknowledge, and then you overcome the hurdle. Man. That's how you do it.
I can't believe you right now.
So let me know. I can give you some names of who we should start with, okay? Speaking of scams, man, I have been watching some of the Olympics from time to time. I got to admit, the Winter Olympics doesn't grab me the way the Summer Olympics does. But I love the Olympics, and I love it for a couple of reasons. Like all sports, it allows you to witness, let's say 3 things. Number 1, you get a protected zone, a safe zone, a legit zone to root for us against them. Like, you don't want to see the world as us and them, right? That's just not a healthy way to go about the world. But in those small compartments of life, like sports, you get to do that. Like Dallas is my city state, and I get to root for that one against all other competitors and warriors out there and send my soldiers to battle against yours, and we celebrate our us versus them, right? The Olympics are us. US of A, red, white, and blue. And we get to root for that. That's number 1. Number 2, amazing feats. Just amazing, wonderful athletic achievements. Number 3, inspirational stories of people who have overcome something and put themselves at the top of the mountain of achievement. The story of Elizabeth Swaney is none of those things. Elizabeth Swaney was the half-pipe skier who earlier this week made news when she went down the half-pipe and did a total of 0 tricks. She went up one side and down the other. Up one side and down the other. Now, why did this happen? Why was Elizabeth Swaney in the Olympics? She's from California, but she was competing for Hungary. How did she make it to the Olympics coming from Hungary? Even assuming, and she had some familial connection to Hungary, that the competition wasn't too stiff in that country. Surely they have some boundaries, some requirements to getting in the Olympics. They do. You have to place top 30 in a couple events throughout the year where these things are held. And she entered so many events, and there are so few competitors every year in all of these competitions that you get 30 by showing up. So she made the Olympics for Hungary with no special skill, no special talent, just a dream. And there are those of us out there that think having a dream is enough to celebrate. You're right. It is worthy to celebrate dreams. But it's also worthy to talk about how difficult and how hard it was to accomplish those dreams. I mean, if I had a dream to sit on the couch every day, no one would do an NBC feature on me for 5 minutes. No one would celebrate me chasing the dream of playing NBA 2K and sitting on the couch for 4 hours. They'd say, that guy's worthless. So not every dream needs to be applauded. And yet here we are. This is an article from For the Win. Yes, she used a shortcut. But let's be honest, she probably wouldn't have made the Olympics if she had trained like the skiers who did medal. She achieved her dreams the way she could, even if it felt a little cheap. In fact, reaching for something seemingly impossible is something that should be done most of her life and was done, according to stories who know her. That's right. She ran for governor of California at age 19 and tried out for the Olympics before in skeleton while trying to represent Venezuela. Finding shortcuts to accomplish your dream sort of undercuts the celebration of the dream. If we're now at a point where we're like, it's just great that somebody's out there doing it for themselves. I mean, I celebrate all the time. Take a risk. Go for it. I didn't even hate Fergie's national anthem because I was like, be creative. Take a risk. It didn't work. She apologized. I love that she put herself out there. But is that what Elizabeth Swaney did? She put herself out there? Really? Or did she find a shortcut around the way out there? The Winter Olympics come to an end this weekend with the closing ceremony on Sunday night. The Will Cain Show's weekend preview is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit us at geico.com or call 1-800-947-AUTO. All right. Could Sam Darnold be the next Tony Romo? Is Baker Mayfield a bad guy? Todd McShay is going to jump in studio next and tell us the answers to these questions. It's the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Thank you for listening to the Will Cain Podcast. You can listen to the Will Cain Show live weekdays at 3 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. The Will Cain Podcast. This is the Will Cain Podcast on ESPN Radio.
Your 2018 college basketball national champion vacated. And as columnist Ray Ratto pointed out, Vacated is working on a dynasty after claiming the 2013 college basketball national championship as well. It's the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Vacated is on a run. Vacated is claiming titles left and right. And somebody pointed out the other day, you know, we talked about what could happen to the Dallas Mavericks in the wake of an investigation into that organization that includes sexual harassment and misogyny. What potential punishments could rain down on the Mavs and Mark Cuban? Perhaps. Vacated might just claim another victim in the NBA. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we got a call at the end of yesterday's show. I got a call. Guys in the control room said, come on in here. Commercial break. Nuno says, you got a call. You got to get on here. So I went in, and let's leave it at this. Somebody who had a very strong voice in the world of professional and college basketball, a very strong voice at ESPN, well, he was a little hot under the collar. And he called in and said he wanted to give me a piece of his mind. I said, don't do that. You don't call me now. You call me tomorrow. At the bottom of the hour, you're going to hear that fight. I promise you on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio. Speaking of fights, Stephen A. Smith did this earlier today on First Take. This is nonsense. Check this out.
Okay, of course, Jerry Jones would be interested in something like this. You know why, Will Cain, especially you? Because Jerry Jones has never really supported Dak Prescott. He didn't support him his rookie year when he was flat out balling because he was in love with his adopted son, Tony Romo. After that, after he retired and left, then he had no choice but to depend on Dak. But he really wasn't feeling Dak. If Jerry Jones had his druthers, Dak Prescott wouldn't be his quarterback. Dak Prescott is his quarterback because he can't help it, because the kid is a stud. But he has favorites. I wouldn't put anything past Jerry Jones. Plus, this would make headlines. And we all know he's an expert at stealing headlines.
The this that Stephen A. keeps referring to, the this that could entice Jerry Jones, is Kirk Cousins to the Dallas Cowboys. Because Jerry Jones loves Tony Romo so much, that means he would love Kirk Cousins. What a crock of nonsense. I'll get to that straight ahead on the Will Cain Show. But right now, joining me on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line is ESPN NFL draft expert Todd McShay. You can check out his podcast, The First Draft with Mel Kiper Jr. New episodes are weekly, and listen to it on the ESPN app or on Apple Podcasts. Todd, speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, I saw one of your fellow draft analysts, Matt Miller, make this comparison. He said, you know who reminds me of Tony Romo? Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold makes plays outside of the pocket. Sam Darnold, actually more than Baker Mayfield, he's the guy, when a play breaks down, is able to make something happen the way Tony Romo did. What do you think of that comparison?
I think parts of his game. You know, the comparisons are always tough. I think the first thing you tend to do is go to size, and Darnold's got a little bit more of that. But they're both really good athletes with great feel in the pocket and the ability. I just think Darnold's kind of a magician when I watch him. I mean, yes, Baker gets out of trouble and runs around and makes a lot of plays on his instincts, and he definitely has mobility. But Darnold, for his size, he's like a basketball athlete. And then he has such great sense in the pocket of where pressure's coming from, when it's coming, and then to be able to keep his eyes down the field. And I actually just got done watching tape of him all day. Him and Ronald Jones, the running back, and their wide receiver, and just making sure I saw every throw that he made this past season. And listen, there are some times where he made some mistakes. There are some times where he gets sloppy with his footwork, and certainly didn't trust his protection for good reason at times this year.
But when his feet are right, he's elite in terms of accuracy. And then there are times in the pocket where I don't have a clue how a guy his size is able to get out of the pocket, escape it, and then have the presence of mind to keep his eyes down the field and find receivers open. He's really impressive. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this class, and people can say they're overhyped, and I understand it with a couple of the guys. Darnold's a special player, and I would have no trouble if I'm Cleveland sitting at 1 taking Sam Darnold.
Todd McShay on the Will Cain Show. Who's overhyped then?
Overhyped probably wasn't the right word. I think Josh Allen has all the ability and potential in the world, but there's a much higher level of risk there because you really got to develop him, and you got to have someone who knows what they're doing in terms of coaching the quarterback position. And I'm not sure that more than a third of the league has a guy in-house that is capable of doing that at a high level. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to drill it and be patient with him and know that there are going to be some bumps in the road, and maybe he's not ready to start year 1. Maybe you got to redshirt him. And so I think he just has to be handled properly in order to get him to a place where he can play at the highest possible level. And if he can get to that place, I think he can be a Ben Roethlisberger type. I really do, with size, mobility, the ability to escape. Even though Ben's gotten bigger and heavier and maybe not the fastest guy in the world, he still creates because of his ability to move inside the pocket and feel pressure. And then the arm strength. Ben's up there in terms of the top of the league with the ability to make throws down the field, and I think Allen can be that guy too. And then with Josh Rosen, he's the most polished and NFL ready of the group. He's outstanding inside the pocket, but what are you getting in terms of the leader and the guy that's going to be the front of your organization? Are you getting a guy that's going to be a great teammate? Is he coachable? Does he need the game? Does he have unbelievable passion for the game and put in the time that all the great ones do? Those are the questions you have to get answered if you're going to spend a top 10 pick and around $25 million of guaranteed money on Josh Rosen.
Yesterday, Booger McFarland was on the Will Cain Show, and he said this flat out, Todd. He said, I think Baker Mayfield's a bad guy. He says he doesn't like his intangibles, doesn't like him as a leader on the field. Who's off the field intangibles are you more concerned about? Do you think has more to answer for, Baker Mayfield or Josh Rosen?
It's different. I think a lot of people are going to really love Baker, and I think there are going to be some people that can't stand him. I think I don't know if it's immaturity as much as he's made some immature decisions. There's no question. And anytime you're starting quarterback and a guy potentially that you're going to spend that kind of money on and invest in is having to apologize a couple times in a season, that's not good. But I think with him, and like a lot of people, what makes people great is also what could be their fatal flaw. And I think it's that energy and passion and fire that he has that sometimes he doesn't know how to channel. And as he grows and matures, hopefully he will learn to. And I think he's very unique, too. I think he's one of the few guys that I can remember at the quarterback position that honestly, they truly loves the game and needs the game. But I also think he really loves what the game brings him and the spotlight and the attention and all those other things. So that he's walking a little bit of a dangerous plank with that, and I think some teams are concerned about it. I think others just view it as, you know what, that's what this guy is. That's his makeup. He's a crazy man. But that's why teammates love him, and that's why if you're on the same squad with him, you'll run through a wall for Baker Mayfield. So he's really interesting in terms of what he brings from the intangibles.
I'm basically out of time, man, but I want to ask you this because you get asked about the top 4 guys, and I play the sound from you saying you think all 4 guys will end up going in the top 10. But you know what's funny? That's where we stop talking. Do you think more than 4 guys will go in the first round? Do you think Mason Rudolph, essentially from Oklahoma State, is going to end up a first-rounder? I
don't think Rudolph will. I think Rudolph will be a second-round pick at some point. I think the one guy who's the wild card is Lamar Jackson. There's going to be a team that's really tempted when you get into the 20s, low 30s, to bring him in and say, you know what, we're just going to figure it out. We're gonna work him at quarterback. We're gonna get the ball in his hands. If he's the most dynamic player with the ball in his hands in all of college football the last 2 years, we can find a way to get value out of that. And I think when you get into the mid-20s, early 30s, there's going to be a team that says, you know what, let's pull the trigger.
All right, man. Thanks. That's ESPN NFL draft expert Todd McShay on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Appreciate it, Todd.
You got it, Will. See you.
You can tweet the show through the You can tweet the show through the oneaaronflowers.com Twitter feed at Will Cain Show. Surprise a friend or loved one today with a bouquet from oneaaronflowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. All right, straight up, I need to respond to that Stephen A. Smith crocking nonsense about Jerry Jones being just crazy enough to go after Kirk Cousins. In no scenario will that come true. It's the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. What's up, everyone? Will Cain here. Support for the Will Cain podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/will. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS, consumeraccess.org, number 3030. Got some breaking and some disturbing news from the world of the NFL, or the former player of the NFL. I'm going to read you this from ESPN.com right now. Former Miami Dolphins offensive lineman Jonathan Martin has been detained for questioning in Los Angeles as the result of a threatening image posted on social media, according to reports. There's this statement from the Los Angeles Police Department. The individual we believe responsible for the social media post in question has been detained, and our investigation is ongoing. What is the social media post? On an Instagram account that is believed to be Jonathan Martin's, the former Miami Dolphins offensive lineman, there was a picture posted that shows the following. It's a picture of a shotgun laying on a bed, shotgun shells scattered around the bed. Typed over the shotgun down the barrel is the hashtag Harvard Westlake. Typed down the butt, the stock of the gun, is the hashtag Miami Dolphins. It says, when you're a bully victim and a coward, your options are suicide or revenge. It also tags 4 individuals. 2 of them are former Miami Dolphins, Richie Incognito and Mike Pouncey. Harvard Westlake is a private school in California. Now, if you'll remember, in 2013, Jonathan Martin was part of that bullying scandal with Richie Incognito. At that time, Incognito and Pouncey were accused of bullying him. It resulted in an NFL investigation, and Martin eventually left the team. He joined the San Francisco 49ers, and he hasn't played in the NFL since 2015. This is absolutely stunning. First of all, what we're looking at here is just the incredible spiral, potentially, if these allegations are true and this post was made by Jonathan Martin, of a former NFL player. Secondarily, and more importantly, this is how law enforcement is supposed to work. An individual like Jonathan Martin, potentially Jonathan Martin, allegedly Jonathan Martin, puts up a post like this, a threatening post, mentions a school, has a school's name written over a shotgun, and law enforcement authorities respond to it and now have Jonathan Martin in custody and are questioning him. And for what it's worth, this is what was neglected to have done apparently 18 times in Florida, where the Parkland high school shooter had been reported to authorities on something like 18 occasions, several occasions. Authorities were warned about this individual's potential danger, and nothing was done. It's absolutely stunning on both occasions. It's stunning that this is where the story of Jonathan Martin suddenly is, and it's stunning what happened in Florida, and it's stunning that this is an example of how it's done right. Now, he's a celebrity, and it's easier to draw attention to what celebrities are screaming into the darkness when they're a threat. He's not a random individual out there in society, but even when random individuals scream and give off warnings, there are those that notice and those that turn it in. And luckily, for now, this is something that authorities were made aware of and are handling. I got great news for those listening to the show. For the Willisha, you can now watch The Will Cain Show when you want, whenever you want. Download the ESPN app and just tap the watch tab to watch full episodes of The Will Cain Show whenever and wherever you want. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. I was on First Take today, and the idea was presented. A writer who used to work for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, now works for Pro Football Talk, a very respected reporter named Cherry Williams. She didn't report this as news, but she just kind of openly thought out loud, hey, and was asked, would Jerry Jones ever have interest in Kirk Cousins? I mean, here's Kirk Cousins on the market, the most in-demand quarterback to hit the free agent market that we can remember. Might the world's biggest buyer, might football's biggest attention seeker be interested in Kirk Cousins? And for all of us on First Take, this was pretty much a dismissibly ridiculous idea. But it was not for my friend Stephen A. Smith. Listen.
Hold on.
Do we have Stephen A. Smith on First Take?
Of course, Jerry Jones would be interested in something like this. You know why, Will Cain, especially you? Because Jerry Jones has never really supported Dak Prescott. He didn't support him his rookie year when he was flat out balling because he was in love with his adopted son, Tony Romo. After that, after he retired and left, then he had no choice but to depend on Dak. But he really wasn't feeling Dak. If Jerry Jones had his druthers, Dak Prescott wouldn't be his quarterback. Dak Prescott is his quarterback because he can't help it, because the kid is a stud. But he has favorites. I wouldn't put anything past Jerry Jones. Plus, this would make headlines. And we all know he's an expert at stealing headlines.
Stephen A., my friend, you make so many logical mistakes. You trip over the hurdle of rationality so many times in that explanation. It makes me wonder if you really, really did, or you're just out here doing your Cowboys hatred. Would Jerry Jones have interest in Kirk Cousins? Clearly not. But even if we accepted it, your rationale is completely unacceptable. Because he loved Tony Romo does not mean Jerry Jones hates Dak Prescott. Because he loved Tony Romo doesn't mean he dislikes Dak Prescott. Because he might have had a favorite in Tony Romo doesn't mean he wishes Dak Prescott wasn't his quarterback. I mean, is this the way people go throughout the world getting into fights with each other? Like, oh, you like him, so you hate me. It's not the way the world works. You can like two people at the same time. You can have a deep relationship with someone who's been around you for a decade and still look at the new guy and go, I really like the new guy too. That's logical flaw number one. Logical flaw number two, because he loved Tony Romo, he therefore somehow would be interested in Kirk Cousins. Because he loved Tony Romo, his love would bypass Dak Prescott and shower down upon Kirk Cousins. This is insane. You think somewhere in the past couple years, while Kirk Cousins was putting up a 1-6 record against the Dallas Cowboys, somewhere in that process, Jerry Jones got a little twinkle in his eye and thought, you know what we could use around here? A little bit of that Kirk Cousins. Yeah, I know. 1-6 and all that. But that one was special. And even if you go, and Stephen A. did, you went to the attention route at some point. You went to the idea that it would create headlines, even to be involved in it. Dak Prescott is headlines. Dak Prescott has every endorsement. He has the number 3 jersey sale in the NFL. Kirk Cousins isn't in the top 30. Dak Prescott's Chunky's Campbell soup. He's Dannon yogurt. He's Adidas. He's Tostitos. He's everything. The Dallas Cowboys have all they need. A franchise quarterback and attention. They don't need Kirk Cousins for any of those things. And they sure don't need his 1-6 record. Yesterday, I got a call at the end of the show. Somebody was heated. You know who it was? Former Notre Dame coach Digger Phelps. He's heated. Not just at me, at Tim Legler. So, he's going to tell us about it next on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Now ADT can help protect your family at home and on the go. Get started with ADT's best offer. An ADT starter kit and security camera installed free. A $449 savings, plus you'll get ADT Go, the new family mobile safety app and service with 24/7 emergency response. Go to ADT.com/podcast today to take advantage of ADT's best offer.
With 36-month monitoring contract, easy pay, and QSP. Early termination and activation fees apply. Additional charge for ADT Go premium services after March 31st, 2018. Certain markets excluded. Licenses available at ADT.com. Offer ends April 1st.
What did I tell you guys when this show launched? I said, it's not my show. It's our show. It's not my time. It's our time. And what did I want? I want, if you hear anything on this program, either from my mouth or someone else's that you disagree with, I want you to come in swinging. I want you to call. I want you to tweet. I want you to tell me what's wrong with what you're hearing. And we've managed to develop that culture already in the short life of this show. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, of course, we've had Snoop Dogg weigh in on his opinions on me and my show. We've had Matt Leinart just this week. Hear Bill Polian, disagree, call in. Seth Greenberg, hear me on Trae Young, disagree, call in. We've had Bill Simmons, Charles Barkley, listen and weigh in. And at the end of yesterday's show, after a nice little conversation with Tim Legler, ESPN NBA analyst Tim Legler, where we both posited the idea that the greatest professional coach of all time was the San Antonio Spurs' Gregg Popovich, regardless of sport. We're talking Belichick. We're talking Jimmy Johnson. We're saying Phil Jackson. We're saying Pat Riley included. Gregg Popovich, greatest coach of all time. But we did say this. Mostly, we're considering modern history. But at the end of the show, you know, I'm wrapping up my paperwork, and commercial break Nuno says to me, what? You say, you come on, you say, Will, what?
You have a call in the studio.
I need to come in there because somebody was on the phone that wanted to talk to me?
That's correct.
And, yeah, and who was that? What happened? I don't understand how this unfolded.
So I got an email from Jen at our assignment desk here at ESPN, with 4 minutes left in the show, saying, Digger Phelps wants to talk to Will. Can I have your extension?
Okay.
So I gave her the extension, and Digger called in.
Wait, so first, Digger Phelps just calls like random ESPN number, like the main line or something?
It's like our assignment desk. And it's just like, I need Will Cain.
Get me Will. Get me Will Cain.
So we made that happen.
So you got an email, and then what happened? Did you call Digger Phelps, or got our number?
So then Digger got our extension, called our number here in the studio, and Bubba picked up.
So I answer the phone. I mean, we're like 90 seconds to break here. I'm trying to count you down, count TV down. All of a sudden, our studio line rings, and I say, "Hey, radio, it's Brendan. Is this Will Cain?" I said no, and he starts yelling at me about your take on Popovich, and he says, "This is Digger Phelps. You know who I am? Or do you remember me?" I was like, "Of course I know who you are. I mean, he coached at Fordham, for crying out loud, and Notre Dame." And I'm like, "Well, we got a minute left in the show here. Could you just hang on?" So I just put the phone down. And I'm trying to get you out to break here, and we just left him on hold, and then you come, and then Nuno tells you come running in. So he was just listening and fired up.
Yeah, and so I come in and pick up the phone, and he starts telling me that Legler doesn't know what he's talking about. What's Legler talking about? Before I could get him to stop, I said, Digger, stop. What are you doing? What are you doing tomorrow? And he said, I'm doing whatever you want. I said, well, come on my show. But before he does, let's just make sure, what is it that riled Digger Phelps up so much? Do we have Tim Legler from yesterday?
Yes.
Let's play this up. This is NBA analyst Tim Legler on the greatest coach of all time.
I personally have said that about Gregg Popovich numerous times.
Oh.
For me, there's no question in my mind he's the greatest NBA coach of all time. And now you start to talk about other sports, and there's a list of names you could come up with. I think he's the greatest. Of the four major sports, he's the greatest team sport coach that we have seen at the professional level.
There it is. And it's a position I happen to agree with. But Digger Phelps, now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, you do not like that opinion.
Well, when you say the greatest of all time in all sports, maybe that's the now generation which you guys are living in. But I'm old school. And let's start with Popovich. Because remember when he went old school with Tim Duncan when they beat Miami a couple years ago? They went inside out. That's old school. And Duncan just destroyed them actually in 5 games. Ray Allen hit that one shot, so they had to play 5. But when Miami and LeBron James and company are going outside in, it didn't work. It was old school. Yes, I agree that Popovich is one of the best coaches in the line of many great coaches in the NBA. But I've got to go back and just let me give a little history to the old school, so to speak, before the now generation doesn't realize why all this came about. We can talk about Casey Stengel and what he did with the Yankees. We can talk about Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers. By the way, when you mentioned Fordham before, Vince Lombardi is a Fordham grad. In 1938, he was one of the 7 blocks of granite, and they went to the Rose Bowl. Vince Lombardi, when I got the Fordham job at the age of 28, coming from the University of Pennsylvania as an assistant, where I was an assistant under Dick Harder, not just Penn, Villanova, LaSalle, St. Joe, Temple, in the Big Five, Vince Lombardi gave me some advice. find the talent you have, and I took a team that was 10-15, and we're going to have a sophomore center at 6'10", and I figure if we could turn this thing around, we'll 15-10 go to the NIT. He tears his knee up the first week of practice. So I got to go with a 6'5" center, start 4 guards. The same team goes 26-3 with our press, beat Julius Erving at UMass. They only lost that year. Notre Dame in the Garden in front of 19,500. Then we go on and lose to Marquette the next week in front of 19,000 in the Garden. They were number 2 in the country. We lose to Villanova to Sweet 16, and they go on and lose to UCLA in the championship. But that same team went 26-3 because of what Lombardi helped me think about as a coach. And then there was Red Auerbach in the Boston Celtics. And we could talk about Bill Russell, but he had John Havlicek as a 6th man. Wow. In 78, we just had a 40-year reunion of our 78 Final Four team. I used John Havlicek and Red Auerbach's theory because I would bring in Bill Lambert and Tracy Jackson off the bench 8 minutes into the game because those guys are better than my starters. Now, who are you going to bring in? So we'd be up 6 and go up 16. But that's what those guys, when they pass the torch to some young guy like me, 28 at Fordham and 29 getting a Notre Dame job, and we could talk about Red Holzman and the next generation and the Knicks with Lucas, Bradley, Willis Reed, and Earl the Pearl Monroe, or Tommy Lasorda and the Dodgers, or Tom Landry and Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, you mentioned Phil Jackson and that next generation with Michael Jordan, or Shaquille with the Lakers. But yeah, Belichick in New England with Tom Brady and the Patriots. Wow, that's now. And when you look at the Boston Red Sox with Terry Francona, and now what he's doing at Cleveland, but there was some other guy in the beginning of this decade, 2010, 12, and 14, with the San Francisco Giants. In that period of every other year, he wins 3 World Series. Bruce Bochy. So what I'm trying to say is, when you look at coaches, you can't pick one and say he's the best all time ever, in my opinion.
So you're saying I just can't do it. I just can't come up with a name. Not that I got the wrong name, but I can't use one name. And by the way, why are you being so nice? Yesterday when you called, what were you saying about LaSalle? What are you talking about?
LaSalle. Wait. Did Tim really play at LaSalle? Oh, yeah. He graduated in 88, and in 85, 86, 87, 88, he went up some great guard, All-American by the name of David Rivers from Notre Dame, and David Rivers was 4-0 against Legler, including 2 wins in the Pluster and 2 wins at the Notre Dame. Is that the same Tim?
Are you doing Notre Dame LaSalle trash talk right now? Is that what you're doing?
No, you just mentioned Tim Legler. I just want to make sure I got the right Tim Legler. Yeah, right. You got
76, but no holes in your trash talk game. I have to take a commercial break, but I want to debate you on this for a second more. Will you hold over the commercial break?
Yes, I will.
Oh, gosh. Honestly, I've never been more nervous on anybody I'm ever going to debate, but I'll do it anyway. Straight ahead on the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Let's say you lived in the Old West. You want history, Digger Phelps? I got history. I got the 1800s. Let's say you lived in the Old West and you said, let's take this out into the street. Let's have this duel. The last thing you want to hear from your opponent is, you bet I want to have this duel. Right before the break, I asked Digger Phelps if he'd hang over the commercial break to continue this debate about who's the greatest coach of all time in pro sports, and his response was, yes, I will hang over the commercial break, which sent, of course, fear down my spine. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. Digger Phelps is still with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, former coach at Notre Dame, former ESPN analyst. All right, listen, Digger, I'm not ignorant of history. Well, at least not completely ignorant. Your contention is you can't narrow it down to one. I have. I've said Gregg Popovich has impressed me enough to name him, in my humble estimation, the greatest coach of all time. Here's my rationale. Here's my reasoning, okay? And I'll use a little bit of history. You know your football as well. Bum Phillips, famous coach of the Houston Oilers, said when talking about Bear Bryant, he could beat you with his'n and then turn around and beat you with urine. I mean, it didn't matter which players he had on his sidelines. He could beat you. He could coach them up. The thing that impresses me about Popovich is the consistency, the 20 years of 50 wins a year, the 5 titles, and the interchangeability of the superstar, from Tim Duncan to Tony Parker to Kawhi Leonard, and his record without them. When they're injured and they're out, he's still winning over 60% of his games. That's why I said what I said.
Well, I agree with you, and that's part of it. But I think right now, how many teams are there in the NBA?
30 teams.
How many teams were there about 20 years ago?
You're going to have to tell me.
Yeah. How many teams were there 30 years ago? I can go back when Major League Baseball had 8 teams in the American League and 8 teams in the National League. But the thing is
that makes it easier. But that makes it easier for the old guys, right?
No. The talent is not spread around like it is now. I think the NBA is watered down. That's just my opinion. But the fact is this. When I look at coaches and what they are and who they are, I mean, I still look at my 2 idols. I mentioned what Vince Lombardi did for me, and I knew him. I knew what Red Auerbach did with the 6-man theory, and I knew him. But Bob Knight was my mentor, along with Al McGuire. Bob Knight taught me defense and strategy. Al McGuire taught me the game of psych. And when you look at 2 legendary coaches, and they stayed at the collegiate level, the impact they made on what coaches are doing today, or Coach K, obviously at Duke, who played for Knight at West Point. So from that standpoint, it's what I want to say to you, Will, and I would hope that maybe on your show you can show some 2-minute history of these guys as you go through each sport down the road. That would help empower your show to let the now generation know who's passing the torch to the next generation. And that's what it is. We are passing the torch from all these people who made it possible in all 4 sports to be what they are today. And that's the thing I don't want to lose when all of a sudden you pick out one guy, say he's the best, and none of the rest count.
I appreciate that. I want that history. I don't know if I'm going to have like 2-minute vignettes, but what if I do this? Every time I make a now generation statement, I call you up to tell me exactly who I'm leaving out.
You can't afford me.
Oh, I got to pay you?
Well, do I have to call to somebody, George Botenheimer? Is he still around?
Yeah, I think he is. I think so. Like I just said, Tom Brady's the greatest football player of all time. I said that. You want to take that one on too? I said that a few weeks ago. I believe that.
Bart Starr wasn't too shaggy.
Here we go.
Bart Starr, baby. Some guy named Y.A. Tittle with the Giants. Y.A. Tittle with the Giants.
Y.A. Tittle. Don't forget Otto Graham. Otto Graham.
Oh, Graham. There's the other legend. Yeah.
All right. I will try my best to remember history. And if I forget, Digger, I can't promise money, but I can promise airtime. You will always have the hotline to get through and tell me how I'm wrong.
I thought Tim was going to be on with us. I guess he backed out when I mentioned David Rivers.
He ran scared. You said LaSalle. He ran scared.
Give him my love, and I give all you guys my love back at ESPN.
All right. Thanks so much, Digger. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. You take care.
It's Thunder Warriors on ABC and ESPN Radio tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think my fellow Longhorn, KD, will be in the zone. In the Zone is brought to you by AutoZone. Get in the zone, AutoZone. That was former Notre Dame and college basketball analyst, Notre Dame coach and college basketball analyst for ESPN, Digger Phelps. That was awesome. That's exactly what I want to happen. You hear it. You don't like it. You hear it. You disagree with it. You let it be known. All right. We got just a few minutes here. Several stories I've pushed that I want to get into. Which one do I have the time to? First of all, let's do this. Let's talk about Kyrie for a second. Reports from Dave McMenamin are that around the time of the NBA draft, 1 week after General Manager David Griffin was fired, several assistant GM scouts, underlings in the management of the Cleveland Cavaliers got together for sort of a brainstorming think session, just kind of throwing ideas against the wall, talking about potentialities. And one of the things they talked about was, what happens if Kyrie leaves? What could we get if Kyrie goes? What could we get for Kyrie? Let's just imagine these scenarios. Now, here's the problem with a spitball session, apparently at the NBA level. Word gets out. People start to hear. And you know who heard about this little brainstorming session? Kyrie Irving. And it did not sit well. It's such a fascinating lesson in how egos can be impacted by the smallest of slights. Now, I'm not suggesting Kyrie shouldn't have been offended, but I think it's just such an interesting, you run this organization, it's a, hundreds of millions, billion-dollar organization that Dan Gilbert owns. He's, no longer employing his number one in charge. And by most accounts, by the way, that's where this should be discussed, between owner and GM. That's where these kind of discussions are had. David Griffin's gone. So now it's basically in the cafeteria, a bunch of, 4, 5, 6, and 7 level managers talking about this, and it completely undercuts the future of the franchise. Now, should Kyrie have had thicker skin? Should he have understood that, organizations need to be able to plan for every eventuality, every scenario? Maybe. Probably. Probably shouldn't have let it bother him so much. But on the other hand, this seems to be working knowledge that managers in the NBA need to know when you're having this kind of conversation. It's not really, what's in the circle of trust. It's not in a vacuum sealed room. We're not in the what is it? Nothing leaves this room scenario. You can't live in that world, so you have to know that's going to get out. And if it does, you have to know it could potentially cost you your superstar or your number 2 superstar. All right. The big story of the day is the NCAA, the FBI coming down on the top 20 programs in college basketball. The biggest names out there: Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina. About players receiving improper benefits from agents. I have said this is simultaneously underwhelming because we all know what's happening, and you get, like a tremor, there's an earthquake to follow, one that could completely disrupt college basketball and perhaps college sports. Seth Greenberg is going to join me to talk about that straight ahead on The Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.